All right. Patricia, I'm going to let you jump in.
Awesome. Hi,
Cool.
everyone. Welcome back to another live community classroom with Michaels. Today, we have the lovely Marley Bird with us, ready for another exciting class. Today's class is how to knit a texture tote bag. My name is Patricia, and I'll be in the chat box answering your questions. So if you have any questions for Marley, feel free to pop them in there. And without further ado, here's Marley.
Well, hello everybody. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces here in the room. I have my view on gallery so I can see all of you guys. So that's always exciting to me. Thank you to Yarn Inspirations and to Michaels for inviting me back for another Michaels classroom. This is so much fun to teach these classes. If you don't know who I am, my name is Marley Bird. I am the host and creator on the Marley Bird YouTube channel. I am a stitch ambassador for Yarn Inspirations Yarn. I am a knitwear and crochet designer and author and teacher. So I do a bunch of different things. And today we're going to learn how to make the knit market tote. It's a textured tote bag that is made using lily sugar and cream. And I have the actual tote here. I'm going to show you guys. This thing, I want you to see it like in perspective of how big this is, because I think it's a little hard to tell like if you're just looking at pictures. But like this is a big bag. Like this is no joke. Yeah, I see your faces. You're like, what? Yeah, this is a big bag. So having said that, I want you guys to know in class today, I'm going to go over the stitches that are used in the bag. I'm not going to make the actual bag because if I did that, we probably would only get about that far, like of the base, like that would be it. So I want to make sure that in class, you're going to learn how to do the stitches that are used on the base, the stitches that are used on the body of the bag, and the stitches that are used on the strap, which coincidentally are practically identical to what's used on the base. This bag is made in pieces and then seamed together. Now, that doesn't mean that the body of the bag is made in a like flat. You actually make the body of this bag in the round, but you do make the base of the bag and the straps both flat. And then when the whole thing is done, you seam the base and the straps to the body of the bag. So for that reason, you are going to need a pair of size 6 circular needles, okay? And I think the pattern says that they want you to have a size 29-inch length. Now, if you've never used circular needles before, this is essentially what they look like. And when you're going to measure your needles, you want to measure from tip to tip. Okay. And ideally, you just want to make sure they're long enough to accommodate all the stitches you're going to have on your needles for this bag. Does that make sense to everybody? Now, we are going to use these needles both in the round for the body of the bag, and we'll use them as just plain old straights for the base and the straps. So that means you'll only need really one set of needles. That's all you're going to need for this entire project. The yarn itself, as I mentioned, it's lily sugar and cream, and this bag was made using 6 balls of these. And I know that there are many different colors you can pick up over at Michael's. Just the sky's the limit. And really on this bag, you can use any color and it's going to come out spectacular. If you don't have the pattern already, I can see right here, Kelly has put a link to the materials list, and I think the full pattern is on the chat. And if you're catching this on the replay, it is linked in the video description box of this video. So make sure you do get the pattern so you can follow along with me. I'm going to be reading the instructions from the pattern, doing the stitches, and then if you're catching the live here and you have questions or you need me to slow down or you have, whatever it may be, make sure you ask it in the chat, and Patricia will be sure to say, hey Marley, hold up, we have a question, and we'll get we'll get an answer for you. Hopefully if I have it right. Okay, so I am going to set that aside and I'm going to jump in. If y'all are ready, let's go ahead, drop down to my hand view. And right down here, I'm going to give you another close-up of this bag. So here is the actual bag, and you can see it does have a lot of texture to it. The base of the bag itself is a nice wide base. It has a really good size here happening. And the pattern that is used down here is called a linen stitch. And the great thing about a linen stitch is that it's very easily to make, and you slip stitches to create a little bit of extra strength, because slipped stitches, you know, and you are like, okay, can you see that strand of yarn right there? That's not a purl. That's a slip stitch behind yarn that then has to be floated behind the, or in front of the slip stitch, and then you knit the next stitch. So because of these floats, the fabric isn't as stretchy. Okay, it's not as stretchy as like this is really super stretchy, right? And this one just is not as stretchy. And that's because the floats keep the fabric a little bit more secure, which makes this stitch pattern really good for the base. It's a nice base. It's not gonna allow your bag to overstretch down at the bottom like a lot of bags do. Now, does that mean it's gonna not stretch at all? No, it's gonna stretch a little bit, but not nearly like if it was just plain stockinette. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. If for some reason this stitch pattern right here is too difficult for you, like maybe you're a beginner and you're like, you know what, I can't remember when I'm supposed to slip, where I'm supposed to keep the yarn, what's supposed to happen. You could do this base in garter stitch. It's going to have a little bit more stretch than this, but you could do this in garter stitch. I just want to throw that out there. Okay. This pattern itself, the tote base, you're going to cast on stitches right down here at the shorter edge. And then you're going to work back and forth across the needles until this base measures 14 inches in length. Okay. So you're not working your base back and forth this way. You're working it this way. So it's going to feel like you're knitting a scarf, everybody. So hang in, hang in there. But let's learn this stitch to start. Okay. Now the pattern has us cast on 29 stitches, and that will give you the full width of your base. I'm not going to cast on 29 because I don't think I need that many for a little swatch that we're doing here. So let me see here. I'm just going to cast on, let's see, 2, 3, and then so a multiple of 2 plus 3 is what I'm going to do. So I'm just grabbing my yarn because I had pulled it out a little bit here, and I just grabbed some Lily Sugar and Cream. This is the color Sage Green. And I'm going to use the long tail cast on. And I think a lot of you probably know how to do this. If you have a different cast on you prefer, you absolutely could use that instead. You do not have to use long tail cast on. Okay. So I'm just going to grab myself enough tail here that I think will accommodate what I'm going to do. I'm putting the tail in the palm of my hand, take my working yarn, wrap it around my forefinger and my middle finger. And when I come back up, I cross over. Rotate my hand, go underneath the front loop, grab that back loop and pull it up, take my fingers out and pull. So now I have a slip stitch or a slip knot. I'm going to call it a slip knot. Just pull those ends apart and I have this slip knot directly on my needle. All right, here's where the long tail cast on comes in. The pattern calls for a size 6 needle in a 29-inch length. I want to make sure the tail is around my thumb and the working yarn is around my finger. And I am essentially, when I bring my needle down here, can you see how it looks like the letter M? Can you see that by chance? So here's this leg, and then here's this leg, and then there's the center bit. The outside legs, so the outside part of the M, I want to grasp those. So I'm going to use these 3 fingers to grasp those. So I have my hand here like a slingshot now. Can you see that? And it's once I get it like a slingshot, I can then begin the long tail cast on. So I'm going to take my needle, I'm going to go to the bottom of my thumb, come up my thumb, go over here to the tip of my finger, come down my finger, grab that yarn. Now I have this opening right here, right? I have that opening right there. I'm going to take this needle and I'm going to swing it through that opening of the thumb and then let the yarn fall off my thumb, pull the tail, and I have that stitch tightened up. Reset and start again. Here we go. Up the thumb, down the finger, through the window, off the thumb. Up the thumb, down the finger, through the window, off the thumb. Now, as I mentioned, this is the long tail cast on. You do not have to use this cast on, but if it's one that you love and you want to use it, please do. If it's one you've never done before, I encourage you to attempt to use it and master it. I know that I have videos on the Marley Bird YouTube channel. I know Michael's has some videos on their channel for long tail cast on that you can go and watch individually if you want more instruction on it. But this is one of my favorite cast ons. Okay. So I just got to read through the instructions. So it says knit one, and then it says stars. So it's going to be knit one, slip one, and we repeat that to the last 2 stitches. So knit one, slip one, knit one, slip one, knit one, slip one, 2 stitches. So I have enough stitches on here to get started, but I'm going to put a couple more on just so you can see. Oh, good. I love that I am not the only one that loves the long tail cast on. I think it's spectacular. Okay. Once you get your stitches on there, whether you're just doing a few stitches like me or you're doing the full 29, it doesn't really matter. You're going to purl 2 rows. So you're going to turn your work, or I shouldn't say turn your work, but put your cast on stitches on your left hand needle in your left hand and begin purling 2 rows. So I'm going to go ahead and purl 2 rows. And I'm assuming you know how to purl. So I am not going to go like super in depth on how to do it. I'm just going to purl along. And I am holding my yarn in my left hand, but the motion is the exact same if the yarn was in my right hand. I just happen to be holding it in the opposite hand. Just a reminder for the pattern, for the base, you will cast on 29 stitches. Okay, 29 stitches. Could you imagine if I was trying to work through 29 stitches right now? Like we just really wouldn't get very far. We're going to do great with this. Okay, so I purled the first row. I'm going to purl the next one. So get to the end of my row and I'll purl this one. So far, I bet you guys are like, all right, yeah, we know how to purl. Let's just get to this. I understand. It's after these 2 rows where the action really begins. So that's the good news. Because after you purl these 2 rows, you'll see where the instructions say that it starts with row 1. So it's really these 2 rows here are just to give us a little something at the end. Like you start off with those purl 2 and you'll actually end by purling 2 rows. And so when you're seaming up, it just kind of puts everything in place where they need it to be. Okay, so we've purled those 2 rows. Now we're going to start with row 1 of the base. Can everybody see my stitches well enough? I want to make sure we're good. Yep. All right. Thank you. All right. So it says row 1, it says knit 1, and then you'll see there's an asterisk, and then it says knit 1, slip 1 purlwise with yarn in front. Repeat from star to the last 2 stitches and then knit 2. So we start off here with a knit 1. So I'm going to start off with my knit 1 stitch. Now the star or the asterisk, that lets us know that that's the repeat, right? So everything that comes after the asterisk until it says repeat, we're going to repeat that, everything that's in that set. So we're going to knit 1 stitch. And then it says slip 1 purlwise with yarn in front. So I'm going to bring my yarn in front, go into the next stitch purlwise. So like I'm going to purl it, slip it off my left hand needle, and then I go to the next stitch, right? So my yarn is in front and I slipped 1. Well, now it says repeat from star. So that means I go back to star and I'm supposed to knit 1. Well, if my yarn's in front, I have to remember to bring my yarn between my needles and I'll knit 1. Bring my yarn in front, slip 1 as if to purl, bring my yarn to the back so I can knit 1. This is very similar to actually just kind of ribbing, only instead of coming up here to do like a purl 1, I'm just slipping it, right? And then I knit 1 and then bring my yarn between my needles as if I was going to purl 1, but I'm actually just slipping it. Bring my yarn between my needles, knit 1, slip it, knit 1, slip it, and then you end with a knit 2. Okay, what that does, every time we slipped one with yarn in front, that's where we got that float that comes across the front of our fabric. That kind of looks like a purl bump, but it's not an actual purl bump. And that's what I was explaining at the start. That float right there, because floats don't have a lot of extra stretch to them, okay? They are actually going to help hold the base of the bag and the straps of the bag really nice and tidy, because the straps of the bag use the same linen stitch, okay? So row 2, we're supposed to purl. So I'm going to turn my work and purl back. So even my slipped stitches, I just purl them. I don't do anything else. So I'm just going to go and purl all the way back. Now I will let you guys know I'm using larger needles today just because I think it's easier to see. So my stitches might look a little bit looser than yours, but it's all because my needles are a little bit bigger. I thought having the bigger needles helps you see the stitches a little bit better. So that's why I did that. Okay. All right. So I'm purling all the way back. Then we get to row 3. And the cool thing about row 3 is it's very similar to row 1, only we're going to alternate which stitch we are slipping. So on the previous row where we slipped, remember we knit 1 to start, and then we knit 1 and then slipped 1, and then knit 1 and then slipped 1, and so on and so forth. On this row, we're going to knit 1 and then slip 1 and then knit 1 and then slip 1. So we're going to slip the one that we didn't slip last time on this row. The other thing to notice here is that the asterisk on this particular row is at the very beginning. All right, so it starts off immediately with that knit 1 as the repeat. So there's my knit 1, bring my yarn forward, go in as if to purl, slip my yarn, bring my yarn back to the back, and repeat it. Knit 1, yarn forward, slip, yarn back, knit. 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 And it's yarn forward, slip, yarn back, and you finish with that knit 1. Can you guys see that? The next row, you're just going to purl. So as I'm turning my work here and purling, I'm going to ask Patricia how everybody's doing over there. Want to make sure everybody is good.
Everyone is great, but Carolyn has a question.
Sure. What would that
Carolyn's
be?
asking, can't you pick up the stitches from the edge of the completed base to start the body?
Carolyn, that is a very good question and is one that I asked as well. Carolyn, if you are an experienced knitter and you are comfortable picking up stitches along the edge of the base to begin the body, then my personal opinion is I don't see why you couldn't. I was trying to figure out in my own mind why the designer didn't make it that way. And the only thing I could come up with is that maybe she or he wanted to have that seam at the base to be able to hold the weight of the bag. But Carolyn, it sounds like you're just like me and you're just like, I don't want to do any extra seaming. I kind of want it all joined together. And if that's the case, then I mean, I know that me personally, I would pick up stitches along the edge here and just work up, but that's me. But yeah, the pattern's just not written that way. All right, so we did 4 rows of the linen stitch. How you feeling so far? Not so bad, right? It's an easy stitch. It's actually a very beautiful stitch. It's one that I teach a lot and I am teaching a lot and I just think it's gorgeous. It's also another beautiful stitch if you ever wanted to make an item that has a little bit more stability to it, or even like a heel of a sock, or I mean, I don't know, like in a scarf pattern. I mean, it's just a really nice stitch pattern. Okay. For the base, you would repeat rows 1 through 4 until this piece measures 14 inches. So as I bring this back over here, you can see my stitches are way looser than the actual piece. And that kind of brings up the little note that I should mention. You do want these to be as solid as you possibly can. So if you tend to be a loose knitter, I would encourage you to attempt to get gauge. So you might have to go down a couple needle sizes, but you don't want your stuff falling out unless you're going to line your bag. You want to make sure it's nice and solid. But this part of the bag would be considered like, it would start down here, right? And then you work the bag all the way up this way. And once it measures 14 inches, you would finish on a right side row, and then you would purl 2 rows and then cast off. So you get the first part. Remember here that this edge right here would actually be seamed in. So this is the edge that's showing, that little bit right there. And that's why that little bit right here is showing. The other part is on the inside because that was cast or put into the seam. But that's how this part of the bag is made. Are there any questions about that? I don't think so. I think everybody's good there. While we have this out here and I can talk about it, even though it's like the last thing on the instructions, for the straps, you also use the linen stitch. But one thing you're going to notice is at the start of row 1, it has you slip 2 stitches purlwise with yarn in back instead of in front. And what that's going to do, other than that, everything else is the same. What that's going to do is it's going to give you this nice roll right here at the edges. Can you see that? You see how I have this, it's kind of looks like an I-cord roll. It's just a very nice rolled edge. It's a finished edge to a very nice stockinette type piece of fabric. And yes, the bag handles themselves roll on themselves just because it is stockinette and stockinette naturally rolls. But my thought process here is the designer did that on purpose because, most bag handles, they are made so that they roll. And sometimes you'll stitch them together. And sometimes I've seen people put rope in the middle of the stitch handle and then fold these over and stitch it together to give a nice, like a grip handle to it. So my thought process here is that not only did the designer want a nice finished edge along the handles, but it makes it's a nice feel. So I'm telling you, like, as I'm feeling this right here, it feels really good in my hand. It doesn't feel wimpy. You know what I'm saying, you guys? Like, it doesn't feel like it's this unsubstantial handle for this substantial bag. It feels like a very good handle for a good bag. But the stitch pattern used on the handle is the same as what's used on the base. The only difference is that it's at that start there, the slip 2 purlwise with yarn in back. Okay, you see that? All right, so having said that, I'm going to set aside my green yarn and I'm going to bring in a swatch that I'm working on because it already has stitches cast on in the round. And I think it'll be easy to show you how this is going to work up. But before I go too far with it, should I show you guys how to cast on in the round? My thought is that you should know how to do that, but I don't want to skip something if it's something you guys need. So if you guys could give me a show of hands, if that's something you want to at least kind of be refresher on or anything like that. And it's silence. So I think everybody has it. That's going to be my guess. I think you're good too. I just assume so. More than anything, guys, you can use the long tail cast on and you can cast on using circulars. So let me just grab another pair over here. Oh my gosh, I've got all the long ones here. Where are my shorter ones?
While you're finding your needles, I have 2 questions. One from Jennifer. Is there a trick to remember which way to wrap for pearls?
Which way to wrap for pearls? Like when she pearls?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it looks like a couple people are saying yes, please. Like they would like to know how to cast on. Okay. So I'm going to pretend that I'm supposed to purl here. And I don't know if she's continental or English, so I'll show both. When you purl, I often think to myself, I need to go around the long way to purl. Whereas if I come this way, it's like it's the shortcut. Okay. And if you do it this way, it's not that it's wrong. It's just that it sits the stitch on your needle differently. So you have to accommodate the next row differently. But when I purl, I like to think of it as I'm going the long way around. I'm going this long way around my needle, and then I'm coming back out. All right. So whether I have this in here and I'm coming like this, it's the long way around the needle, and then I'm popping it back out. Does that make sense? Long way around and back out. If I go this way, if I come in and I come underneath, it's like it's a shortcut. It's like, oh, I'm cutting in line. And yeah, it makes sense. Like I can see how it seems like it would be a lot easier just to pull that through with it coming that way. Like it totally makes sense to me. It's just that the way the stitch is then seated on your needle is different than what is most commonly taught. So you would have to make adjustments in your knitting. And unless you have somebody there to help you do that, or you're able to teach yourself how to do that, this is the most common way here, at least here in America, I would say. But you just go in and just go the long way around. That's the way I think about it. Okay.
Jennifer says, I like that. Thank you.
All right, good.
And I have
Awesome.
another question from Aurora before
Sure.
we move on. Could you add 2 stitches to the beginning and the end of each row so that when you seam the purl edge at the beginning and the end of the base goes all around the base? So adding
yeah, you could add stitches. Like, yeah, if she wanted to have a purl bump edge so that she could have it all the way around, yeah, you could do that. Or you could even do what I think it was Carolyn and I were talking about. Maybe at the beginning, I mean, if we're going to alter it, let's just alter it. At the beginning, instead of starting with the purl bumps, just start with some knit rows. And then when you go, if you were to pick up stitches around your base, you could actually pick up with the wrong side facing and have your raw edge be like a decorative edge on the outside. Does that make sense? Like you could do, or if you're a crocheter, you could go and crochet over the whole piece and then have the top part of the crochet be around the edge of the base. And there's lots of different options, lots of different ways to do it. But to answer her question specifically, if she wanted, because this is, I mean, it's a purl bump, right? If she wanted to have just a row of purl bumps, like if she wanted to add 2 rows, or I'm sorry, 2 stitches on either side. So that way one of the stitches would be into the seam and then the resulting remaining stitch for the purl to go up all the edge. Yeah, you could do that. You could easily do that. Just write it down in your instructions. And I think somebody was asking me as far as casting on in the round. Casting on in the round, guys, it's really just as easy as what we were doing. We were casting on before, only as the stitches are working and you're putting them on your needle, at one point your slip stitch is going to be over here, and your slip stitch will be over here. The last stitch you cast on will be here, and you're just going to work into your slip stitch, thus working in the round. So like, I'm going to bring this over because this is what I was going to work on too. This piece here, let me do this. This piece here, I cast on to work in the round. So I have all the stitches. You can see they're all just resting on a cord. This stitch marker right here indicates the start of my round. And so what you would do for your bag is do just that. You would cast on all of your stitches. And when you got to that part of the round, you would join, being careful not to twist. I can show you. I'm going to show you. So I'm just going to grab some yarn and do it. I'm just going to grab a different yarn just so it's real easy to do. Maybe it's not easy to do. For the long tail cast on for the body of the bag, it requires 180 stitches. So I would err on the side of caution and really just get yourself a nice long tail. Even if you don't use it all up, you could use it for seaming the bag. You know what I mean? If you have a long tail and you're going to seam the bag, you can use it to seam the bag. So I have my tail. I'm going to just do a slip knot right here. These are 29-inch needles actually. And so I put this on and you just start doing your long tail cast on. So I'm just going to start doing this. If you happen to underestimate how much yarn to cast or how much tail you need to cast on, here's a little trick, something that you could do. And I didn't do that because I just kind of guesstimate. If you take your yarn and wrap it around your needle for the same number of times as you plan on casting on stitches. That typically will give you the same, that'll give you a long enough tail. Or if you know that say the circumference of whatever you're working on is 20 inches. If you make sure your tail is 20 times 3, so 3 times the circumference or the length or whatever you're doing. So that would be 60. If you know it's 60 inches, and then I always add myself at least another 5 inches, that will give you enough length to get through a long tail cast on. And the reason for that is because a circle, the circumference of a, right, the circumference of a circle is 3.14, it's pi. Is that the way it is? The circumference, diameter, whatever it is. And so because your knit stitch is basically a circle, that's why you would take whatever the measurement is of what you're making, multiply it by 3, give yourself a little added extra, and then you'll have a really nice cast on. Now, when I'm doing long tail cast on like this for a lot of stitches, I typically will put a stitch marker like every 20th stitch. So that way I can go back and count. So let's pretend that this is where I would want a stitch marker. I would just grab one, throw one on, and then keep going. Now, if you don't have any stitch markers and you're interested in making them, I will tell you that Michaels has a great beading area, jewelry supply area that you can buy a bunch of beads and whatnot and make your own stitch markers. I have videos for how to do that. So if you're interested, they're available to you. So if you're here on the Michaels Classroom and you are a crafty little person, I was going to say little diva, you absolutely could go make your own stitch markers. And it's a fun way to add some jewelry to your work if you don't just want to use the plastic stitch markers. But you just keep adding your stitches just like so. And you'll see I'm just going along. And let's just say that was another 20. I have no idea how many it is, but I could grab another stitch marker and place that on my needle and then just keep going. So at some point, you'll get all 180 stitches on your needle. And you'll notice as I'm working these, see how as they're working, they're starting to just go around my needle. Okay, they're coming around the cord and eventually they'll work their way back up to this needle. So I'm going to keep going so I can get as many on here as I can so I can show you how you would do the join. And while I'm doing this, I will tell you that the body of this bag is a stitch multiple of 5 stitches. So if you wanted to make this bag smaller or bigger or whatever it may be, you do want to make sure you have a stitch multiple of 5 for the body of the bag, which is, you know, a really easy mark to do. I'm not going to put any more stitch markers on because I feel like you guys know how that works. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to get these up here so that way I have enough stitches to show you how to make sure you don't accidentally twist your stitches when you join to work in the round. And then I will demonstrate how to do the actual stitch for the body of the bag. And I'll do it on that little piece that I already have kind of worked up. I thought it was easier to show you on something that was already established. So that way you can easily see how these stitches work. How you guys feeling? How many of you are like, okay, I'm just going to keep working on the base of the bag right now? I see you, Ruth. I see you. Stick. Oh, look, it's going very well. That's a beautiful color. I love it. It looks beautiful. It looks so pretty. I will, like I said, you guys, sometimes I feel like 14 inches just feels like it takes forever to get there. And like 1 minute you're going to measure it, it's going to be 12 inches. You're like, ah. And then you're going to work some more and then you're going to measure it and it's going to be like 11 inches. And you're like, what? But that's the world of knitting and crochet sometimes. But hang in there. Just make sure you get it all as long as you want it to be. All right, so I think I probably have just about enough stitches to make this work. Let me see. And I can pull these around. Yeah, I think I do. So as you are casting on, you get all of the stitches on your needles. Okay, those are all on your needles, just like this. And, you know, if you used markers, great, you'll have a marker like every 20th stitch, whatever it may be. And what you're going to notice is the needle that has the yarn attached to it still, that needle is going to be in your right hand. The needle that has your slip knot or the first stitches you did onto it, that's going to go into your left hand. If you use the long tail cast on, which is one of the reasons why I really love this, you'll see you have a really nice ridge right here along the bottom of this cast on. And it makes it very easy just to quickly be able to look at your stitches and make sure they're not twisted anywhere, right? Because I can make sure this ridge is all on the inside of my circle. It's not twisted. And what I mean by twisted would be like if it went like this, right? If it looked like that. Because if we started working into our knits that look like that, it's not going to work out right. So we want to make sure that everything is all the same direction and it looks just like so. Then what you do is you join to work in the round. And there's no big trick to this. If you're a crocheter, that doesn't mean you have to do a slip stitch or anything. You simply are going to start knitting. So our ultimate goal here is going to be taking the yarn from this needle and then knitting into this first stitch here with this yarn, thus connecting that stitch to that stitch, kind of like a spiral. But before we do that, we do want to add a marker to signify the start of the round. Okay, so I'm going to put a marker on my right hand needle, pick up my left hand needle, make sure you're not using your tail, and simply start knitting. So I'm going to go right into this first stitch and you start knitting. Okay. I want to make sure, yeah, the first 2 rows of your body of the bag are just knit. So you just knit that first stitch, knit that next stitch, and you keep going. Now your tails might come, or your join right here might come apart just a little bit, but that's okay. You can seam that closed with your tail. And obviously I estimated pretty good with my tail, so I could use this to, seam up my bag so I wouldn't have to join any new yarn or anything like that. But as you just start working like this, and the stitches come up, as they start to get a little bit tight on the left, they're going to get bunched up on the right. You just move them down, make sure that nothing's getting twisted on you, right? Because you don't want to start working along and then have something twist on you later. Just keep everything nice and straight and keep going. Does that help all of you who were interested in how to do circulars? Okay. You got that? All right. So you would do this for 2 rounds. On rounds 3 and 4, that's where the stitch pattern changes up. So I'm going to set this aside. I'm going to bring in my stitch or my piece here that already has some other work to it. Now this obviously is not the stitch pattern we're working on down below, but I'm going to build on this with the stitch pattern that we're using. So I am on a knit row. I've already knitted 1 row or 1 round. So I'm going to knit another round. So I'm going to finish up this knit round. So this would be my row or round 2. And somebody asked me, I think in the chat, for the body of the bag, your round 1 is a right side. Correct. Every single round is considered a right side. As you notice, as I'm knitting with this, I am looking at the public side of my work. I don't have my knitting like this. Okay, see how the public side of my work is not on the inside of my circle. I want it on the outside of my circle. It's like I'm looking at the outside. This would be the inside. Does that make sense? So because of that, you are always looking at the right side of your work when you are working in the round of this pattern. And right here, as I mentioned, this is as if I'm working a round 2, which is just knit. So I'm just going to get to the end of my round, which I will know where it is because I have my marker there. So as I'm doing this, Patricia, are there any questions? Anybody saying anything?
Well, you have some compliments.
Oh, nice.
QD says great instructing. And Carol would like to see how you seam the base of the bag if we have time.
Okay, I can do my best to give some help, but really it's just going to be a whip stitch. So let me talk through it while I'm just knitting here. When the base of the bag is done and the body of the bag is done, you're going to pin the base to the body. And when you pin it all together, just kind of line it up, make sure everything looks good. You're just going to take either your tail that you left nice and long on the body of the bag or rejoin with new yarn. And you're going to whip stitch together the body of the bag and the base. The instructions do not say that we have to do any particular stitch as to join it. It just says seam it together or sew it together. And on the bag itself, it is a whip stitch. I turned it inside out to look because the seam does end up being on the wrong side. So when you pin it, you want to have right sides together. So that way you're looking at the wrong sides. And when you do that, that'll put the seam on the wrong side. All right, so I'm at the start. I want to show you this. This was my join right down here at the very beginning. You can see it's just a little bit jagged, and that's because we're working a spiral. That's the whole point of working in the round. But I have this tail right here that when I seam it in, it's going to close that up, and you're never going to be able to see that. You guys see that right there? So I always, I mean, you can see I just kind of put up my tail like a butterfly, and I just let it hang there until it's time to weave in my ends. All right, so on this pattern, this is where you would begin round 3. And I don't know if you guys noticed this, but the texture on the bag, it looks a little bit like garter stitch, right? But it's reverse stockinette. So the bag itself has a series of rows that are just knit in the round and a series of rows that are purled in the round. So that way you get stockinette and reverse stockinette and reverse stockinette. So if you thought, haha, I'm going to be in the round, I'm never going to have to purl, you are wrong. So every round 3 and 4, you are going to end up purling 4 of the stitches, and then you're going to slip one purlwise with yarn and back. All right. Whereas when we did the linen stitch, we slipped with yarn in front to get that line here. We're going to slip one with yarn in back. And what that'll do is it puts the float in the back of the work. And so you aren't going to be able to see it, but it gives this really nice long line of slipped knit looking stitches along a bed of stockinette, reverse stockinette fabric. Can you see that? Okay, so the first 2 rounds that we did, those knit rounds, those are like what's in between these 2 reverse stockinette. See that? They're right there. So now we're going to do these 2 rounds. And when we do these 2 rounds, we're also going to have our slip stitch begin. So that is where we are. I'm going to pick this up, and we do both of these rounds the exact same way. So we start off by a purl 4. So I bring my yarn forward. And this is right after my marker. So after you've knit your 2 rounds, after your marker, go ahead and purl 4 stitches. And then
I'm having trouble hearing you.
What? Oh, my my watch Siri is like talking to me. I was like, what is going on? I'm sorry. That's a new one. That has not happened. I apologize. All right, so purl 4, bring my yarn to the back, go in purlwise, slip it. Okay. And then you're going to repeat. So we'll bring our yarn forward and we will purl 4. That's so funny. That has never happened to me before. Bring my yarn to the back, slip one as if to purl, and then bring my yarn forward and purl 4. So every time we slip one, that's going to give us that really nice line of what looks like a line of knit stitches. Okay. It's very hard to see anything happening right here. It's going to take a couple of the rounds to get it going. So I'm just going to keep going here. You guys can do the same. If you have a question right now, this would be a good time because Patricia could jump in and let me know.
Well, we do have some questions.
Good.
Jennifer wants to know, did you say the stitch repeat on the body is a repeat of 5?
Yes.
Okay.
Because it's 4 purls and then 1 slipped stitch. So 4 purls. And then we'll do 1 slip stitch.
Great.
Okay.
Carol also has a question. Could
Sure.
we use a crab stitch from crochet to join the base to the bag as well?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I think that would look very lovely. I love if Carol knows me at all, she knows I love me a crab stitch. Like I like to stick it on wherever I can because it's like one of my favorite stitches. And it's a beautiful stitch to add as well. Like yeah, I don't see why you couldn't.
Amazing. And
Yeah.
then Wendy and Jean are asking about adding a liner to the bag. So Wendy wants to know if I wanted to line the bag with fabric, is there a thread that you would recommend? And Jean would like some ideas on how to add a liner.
All right, so I am not a seamstress at all, so I'm not even going to pretend to be one on TV. Um, I have lined bags before, but they look very Frankenstein, so I'm not a good person to ask for how to line bags, but I will let you know. Let me grab, I have a, do I have it right here? Oh, where is it? I have a thread that I love. I can't find it. I just moved down here to my new office, so everything is out of place. Patricia, do you have a thread that you like? Oh, here we go. I love these ones. I don't know if you ever use these. Like just, you know, the Coats threads that are available out there. I think they're awesome.
Yeah, I would probably just use a polyester thread.
Yeah.
Kind of
One of the
sturdy.
all-purpose ones.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Hey, and just side note, if y'all have never seen this one before, it's really awesome. It helps secure those buttons in place. That's why I love it so very much. But yeah, I'm sorry guys that I'm gonna have to absolutely refer you to somebody else as far as how to line the bag. I could tell you what I would do, but it might not be even correct. But if I can line a bag, even like a Frankenstein-esque bag, you can do it too. Just get yourself some fun fabric and go for it. It's not a bad idea. Or, you know, I've seen people before who have taken a bag that they really like, but maybe it has something on the front that's outdated or, you know, a saying or dates or whatever it is. And they'll actually make their bag like this to the size that it would fit around that bag. And so once the knit bag is all complete, because I mean, I just gave you all of the stitch counts and whatnot. Once their knit bag is complete and it's all sewn together, they'll take the other bag and they will stitch it to the inside of their knit bag as a lining. But now it's a covered bag. You know what I mean? They no longer are embarrassed by whatever it is on the front that was embarrassing them. Just another idea. Any other questions?
Now everyone's just really excited to get knitting their bags.
Knitting the bag, yeah. You know, I think it's interesting because bags are one of those projects that they're super fun to make because they go relatively quickly. They're completely useful, and they're just unique, especially as we're coming into the spring and summer months where you kind of want a lighter project. Sometimes a bag is just an easy one to have on hand. Just so you can whip out some stitches on it or to try out new stitches. It's just a good little thing to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Carolyn has a good question.
Yes.
Any suggestions for switching colors in the body?
Ooh, you know what you could do? So in the bag, because you have these purl rows, you could do like a different color, like one color for every knit row and one color for every purl row. And then what would happen is when you slipped these slipped stitches would be the color of the knit, the opposite. You know what I mean? So like if the knit here were purple and the purls here say were green, as we were working those 4 purls and we were slipping one stitch, it would be a slipped purple. You see what I mean? So you would look like you'd have purple lines going up. So if you're going to switch colors, I would do it every 2 rows. And I would do like rows 1 and 2 in one color and row 3 and 4 in a different color. That's what I would do. Does that make sense? Did I answer the question? Like, I think, or was she asking, how do you change colors?
No, she says it's awesome. I love that idea.
Yeah, that would be really cool. And that'd be a great way to have something really unique. Yeah, or if you were making this bag with a different type of yarn, maybe you have one yarn that is a long color changing yarn, and one that is a solid. So maybe like, I don't even know how unforgettable would look up, but say you had, oh no, let's say Karen cakes. Say you had a solid of like the Karen cotton cakes, and then one of the variegated ones or the long color changing ones. So you could do the solid in the knit spaces and the color changing one in the purl spaces. And then you'd have it look like you did all of this color work, but you have a solid seam going through, but it's not a seam, it'd be the knit. Like that would be really cool. Like make it look like you did a ton of work, but you really didn't. That would be a cool thing to do.
That
See,
sounds
I mean,
beautiful.
this is how I became a designer, you guys, because I look at other people's patterns and I'm like, huh, I would do this. You know, I'm going to change this. So I very rarely follow patterns the way they were written. And then all of a sudden I just started doing my own because, you know, at some point it's no longer that same pattern. But, you know, I'm glad to see there are so many of you out there that are just like me in that process. As you're going along, I don't know if you have picked up on this or not, but because I'm talking, I often will lose track of how many purls I've done. And so every now and again, I'll stop and I'll go and I find where my slip stitch is. And then I count, I'm like 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, there's my next slip stitch. So I just keep checking on my count. So that way I don't have to rip out my work and, you know, restart anything. And the cool thing is on row 3 or round 3, obviously we're essentially setting up the process here at the start, but as you continue on, it's going to be very easy to see where the slip stitches are because we're going to have that nice line of knits that were slipped, which will be really cool. And here we go. I'm pretty sure I have, yep, I do. Because I had 140 stitches on here. Okay, so there's that. So now I'm on to round 4, which is just like round 3. And if you're reading your knitting, you don't really have to think too much because you just have these purl bumps right here. You see that? You just have these little purl bumps. So you can just purl the purls. And when you get to the stitch that looks like it's a knit, like kind of an elongated knit, you can be like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to slip that. You see how if that was a different color, like if those knits were a different color, that would still be that different color, giving you a really cool look. But that's basically it, you guys, because you work this part, you work the body until it measures 14 inches. You can make it longer or shorter, whatever you want. And then you purl around and then knit around, and you do that twice, and that gives you some garter stitch, because if you haven't picked it up yet, in order to get garter stitch, you have to do what would be thought of as stockinette by purling around, then knitting around, then purling around and then knitting around. That gives you this garter stitch up here at the top. So it's just a garter stitch finish, which comes together very well with the reverse stockinette that's done in here. You see that? And you can see it has a little bit of stretch. It's still nice. It's great. Once that's done, then you have your all your pieces done, right? You have your base done, you have your body done, then you have to make both straps. Once all that is done, let me see if I can figure this out. Once all that is done, I'm going to turn this inside out so you can see here. So here's the base. And essentially you would take the bag and it's inside out. So now the right side of the base is on the other side. The right side of the bag is on the other side. And you would take it and you'd pin it just like so. All right. You'd pin it all around, make sure your corners were in place. Everything looks good. Something that I would probably do as myself, you had 180 stitches. Is that what it was? So you have what's 180 divided by 2? Like that's 90 and 90. So I would probably make it to where I had 90 stitches on that side, 90 stitches on that side. Does that make sense? Like I would probably line them up in the center of the short part of this so that I had 90 and 90. And then I would, as I was pinning, I'd probably make sure that everything looked really nice and even so that it's not twisted in any particular place. And then once it's all together, quite literally, you're just going to whip stitch the piece together. So let me grab, I can't grab this yarn. Hey, here's a little tip. If you can't ever find your scissors, add a pom-pom to them. You will never lose them. Yes, it's obnoxious, but that's the whole point. Okay, so if you grab your tapestry needle and you grab your yarn, and it's the same yarn that you use to make your bag. If you use the Lily Sugar and Cream, you would just pin them together like this, and you would just whip stitch. So you would just pull this through and then pull this through and pull this through. Like you see this. So you see how the green here, see how they're going like this? Can you see that? There's the actual whip stitches on the bag. Those blue ones that are kind of diagonal there. Those are what were used to create this bag, to seam it together. But this is just all you would do. That's called a whip stitch. And then once that's all done, and especially if you did it in the same color, it's not going to be visible on the opposite side. And then you would just tuck in your tails wherever they would be. It looks like there were a lot of different seaming places here on this particular one. And you would do the same thing as far as how to seam. Oh, it doesn't want to come undone now. As far as how to seam the what are those called? Straps in place. You would pin them to where you think they are good. I would suggest pinning them in place first before you sew them in, and like check and make sure they're evenly spaced out on the piece. So that way you don't have a strap like that's in one location versus another. But you can see here, the straps are stitched in right alongside, like there's the garter stitch. Here's where the strap is, and it's just picked up right along that garter stitch ridge there, and it's just stitched in right there. Just with the whip stitch also, it's just whipped it all together. You can see these were matched up. So one strap gets connected at 2 points on the same side. So you wouldn't take one strap and then connect it like to this long side and then over to the other long side. So one strap gets connected to the same long side, and then they're equally spaced so that if you fold it, they're equally spaced where that's the edge, there's the edge, and then here's the center bit. You see that? Does that help? Yeah, good. Thank you, Adele. Hi, Adele. I just saw you there, my friend. All right, so here we go. This is the bag. It's how lovely it is. You can see this awesome stitch pattern, and now like I totally want to go make it in 2 different colors because that's how I am. Kelly, if you want to go back to my face really quickly. Okay. So this is the bag once again, so you can see how large it is. If you change the size at all, just remember to keep the same stitch multiples, so that way you can work it out. And as Kelly mentioned at the start, if you work on this bag, even if it's like work in progress, or you make it even a year from now, make sure you tag all of us. You can tag me, Marley Bird, hashtag Marley Bird. On Instagram, I'm the Marley Bird, so you can find me and hang out. Like, I would love to be able to like your project, or hashtag Make It With Michaels, hashtag Yarnspirations. I would love to see your bag and all of your projects. If you like videos like this, make sure you check out all of the other videos on the Michaels YouTube channel, Yarnspirations YouTube channel, and the Marley Bird YouTube channel, because there are a lot of wonderful instructors and instructions out there teaching you how to become a better knitter or crocheter. I hope you enjoyed this class. Don't forget to get that free pattern and check out all of the hundreds and thousands of free patterns that are available out there at Yarnspirations. That's it for me, everybody. I'll give it back to you, Patricia.
Thanks, Marley. Just wanted to say thanks to everyone for joining us today for this live community classroom with Michaels. As Kelly has posted in the chat, you can view the recording of today's class in 24 to 48 hours at michaels.com/past-classes, and it will be uploaded to the Michaels Stores YouTube channel in about 24 hours.
Awesome.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye. Go, Ruth, go.